Welcome to Mac and Bleu, the cutting-edge podcast for the nation's builders, merging the realms of construction with exciting advancements in technology. Join us on a thrilling journey where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain, AI, the metaverse, virtual and augmented reality, and their transformative impact on the industry. Our engaging discussions span a wide spectrum, covering not only construction, economic development, supply chain, and market segments, but also exploring the vibrant tapestry of diversity within the construction landscape. We shed light on the intersection of local politics and its profound influence on the construction sector, while championing the remarkable contributions of women and minorities in construction. For all things Mac and Bleu, head to www.macandbleu.com and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky. Now let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Mac and Bleu. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky, CEO and co-founder of Bleu. Today, I'm lucky enough to have Matt DiBara. Matt is the CEO of DiBara Masonry, and he's also the co-founder of the Contractor Consultants. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Matt's in SoCal. I'm in Phoenix, but we're doing the virtual thing here, so it'll be fun. Matt, before we get into all the cool things that you've done and that you're doing, people always want to know a little bit about you. The Reader's Digest version of a resume or the background. So if you don't mind, go back to the Massachusetts upbringing and let the audience know a little bit about how the hell did you get in this industry in the first place?
Yeah, well,
and don't tell me you won the lottery. Don't say you won the lottery, right?
Yeah, well, I thought based on my resume, we'd know that I didn't win the lottery. But it's a true rags to kind of it's that blue collar American dream story. I think I was real fortunate. My story starts a little unique in the sense that my great grandfathers are a lot of what I do, believe, and act today was established by them. They came here from Italy to America. They both built their homes from the ground up. And I think they did a really good job of establishing some core values and principles when they got here. So, there's things that my grandfather taught me as a young kid. Honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Treat customers like they're your neighbors, like these little nuggets that pass down. But in essence, they were builders, but they loved masonry and concrete. They thought that was art. And they just built their own homes, and then they did it for neighbors. And more people asked. And they joked that, we can't track when we started officially, the records back then in the early 1900s weren't great, but we joked that we became contractors when they worked for people who spoke English. So when my grandmother and grandfather as kids had to help translate contracts and oh my gosh, what's this word in English? That's when we officially became contractors. And so that passed down from my grandfather, my father, my uncle. I started at a young age. My dad would come home tired and dirty every day, but proud of what he did. And he would show me photos of things that he built. He would print them out once a week. He'd come home with just a big stack of photos, and I'd go through with my dad and see all the things he was doing, whether it was masonry or concrete or site work. And I started working when I was 9, had a lot of energy, and my dad would have had me work at 4 if my mom would let him. But at 9, she was like, he's old enough and a pain in the butt enough, take him. So that was my first day on the job. Yeah. Started picking up trash. That was the first thing my dad did. Like the Karate Kid, he's like, okay, you want to work with me? Boom, hands me a black trash bag, pick up all the trash, and started from the ground up. And, I grew quickly because my dad started me at the very lowest level, so I earned respect from the crews, but also paid me as fast as I learned things. So by 13, 14, I was laying brick, block. I was running crews by 15, 16, and I had earned the respect from these older guys that my dad had on the crew because I picked up their trash, I got their water, I folded rolled their extension cords for 3 years prior, that I was able to learn that. And then, the story goes on. I went to a vocational high school for bricklaying and placed second in the country and took over the family business and really just tried to modernize the company. As kind of the rest of my career path was about being really scared. I was always very scared. I was so scared that I was going to ruin the family name. I was going to ruin the business. And I think at a young age, that fear probably was a little bit exaggerated. And then as I got older in life, I learned to work with that. And that was a big growth driver for me, being proud of what we had built and things. Obviously, a modern version of this is what we have today.
So go back. Now, was all that, Matt, was all of this in Boston or Massachusetts proper?
So a lot of it was, and I moved to California. I came out here in 2015. I wanted to relocate the business, hated the cold weather, and, wanted to reestablish ourselves on the West Coast.
So let the audience know, when did you officially like take over from your dad or your grandfather, and what were those years like? And are they still alive? Are they still involved in the business in any way, shape, or form?
So my grandfather passed away. My dad is retired. He's dealing with some dementia. He got early onset dementia, and so that's hard to watch. But he was around for some of the big milestones. We got an award from Congress, and so I'm happy that he was able to see kind of the completion of what he really built. But I took over. I mean, I was running the company, driving the business right around like 17, 18. I mean, I was on projects that were $500,000 to $1.5 million. I mean, my dad would leave me with the architect. He didn't have a lot of patience. So like he'd sit in a meeting and it would get boring. He'd be like, you figure it out. And I'm on a $1 million project we got 15 people on the crew and the architect's looking at me. I mean, I look like I'm 17 now. Imagine what I looked like then when I was 17. And the architect's like, is he for real? My dad's like, I'm like, yeah, he's for real. This is just me. And so that was really when I took hold of the business.
What were the struggles as a fourth generation, right? What were the struggles that most people don't understand, being in the family business and growing it to that next level? Because you always hear about a first generation builds it, second generation it makes it better, and the third generation pisses it away. You beat that, you beat those odds. But what were the struggles you had going into taking over from your dad or your grandfather?
There was a lot. I mean, so the big ones that I think are actionable for anyone listening. One was like my dad knew so many things and was able to pass down so much so quick, but I also inherited his blind spots. And so at a young age, I'm 14, 15, I start now having to distinguish between, oh, my dad's right. For example, my dad used to say, nobody will ever work as hard as family. We had 40, 50 people in the company, but we knew people. I knew a company that had 1,500 and 3,000 employees, and they're huge, multi-billion-dollar company. And I'm going, in my head, I couldn't clock the math. I'm like, they got 1,500 people, and they're all working hard. They're a great company. They've grown. We've got 40 or 50 at the time. Like, there were certain blind spots, and at 15, 16, 17 years old, we start coming up on me taking over the company. Like, what does that look like? And my dad was old school. He said, you haven't earned it. You haven't put in enough years. It was never enough. And I know where that came from. His heart was like, he didn't want to, he didn't want to risk handing it over to me and it fail. And it came from a loving place, but it was very much like, I almost could never do enough. And it got to a point where when I was right around probably 19 or 20, I was more confident in my ability to start distinguishing between like my dad's strengths and his blind spots. And my goal was to work through those and help kind of complement those. Like, for example, one big one was marketing. My dad was very proud of word of mouth marketing, and he did a lot of print ads. Like, I sat with the Yellow Page salesperson at 9 years old. I used to go with my dad to get pizza, and we would, go from a quarter page ad to a half page to like, that was my childhood. And I saw the advent of the internet, and I was like, this is it. This is a gold mine. And you're going back now to 2008 when, a lot of companies were in the recession. I saw mega companies, 9-figure businesses go away overnight. And so I was scared, and I was like, we got to learn the online marketing. My dad's like, we don't need to. Like, our business is so sound. We advertise on print. And so that's when I actually pushed back. And I actually got my own license when I was in college. I was a freshman or sophomore, and I got my own license and started advertising online. Didn't tell them. Like, literally went out, got my own contractor's license, started advertising, started selling jobs. And it wasn't until I referred him. I was away at school and I was doing these little foundation repairs. I was making great money on the weekends, and I was still doing bids for my dad through the internet at night. I mean, it was working all the time. And I referred him a $300,000 project that I paid $46 for the lead. I said, hey, Dad, I've been doing this online thing. I got a project. Can you take a look at it? And he was like, from where? I'm like, from the internet. He's like, how much did it cost? I'm like, $47 or whatever the number was. It was right around $50. And he closed a $250,000 big stone restoration project. And that's what sparked him being like, okay, like he's ready. But we had a lot of that.
That's cool. Did he disown you after that?
I mean, it was close. I mean, it's a good thing he sold the job, or he might have.
No, it's like, Yeah, I meant more about you getting a license behind his back. I can imagine that was in an Italian family. That would have been funny as hell.
Well, it kind of became funny because he would joke. He'd be like, he would like people would call in and ask, and he would be like, oh, you want my son's company? You know, he'd like joke around. If it was a real big project, he'd be like, oh, call my son's company. He'll give you a better rate to like his contractor friends. You know, so he was always digging into me for that for many years.
Hey, go into and thank you for that view into your life back then. Talk about some of the things that put you on the map as far as where were those. Think back to when you took those first big risks or big steps, and was there a project, some projects, something that put you on the map? Can you think back to that?
Yeah, there was a bunch. I mean, some of it was principles, right? Like one thing my dad did extremely well was as soon as a new product hit the market, my dad knew about it. Like there was not a masonry, concrete, carpentry. I mean, like we would go to the trade shows, we were buying stuff. Like my dad was on a list. I don't know how he did this, but he was on a list where he would get pre-released tools and they would ask him for feedback on stuff. Like he was very into modernizing the business in that way. And that was a very important lesson that I got from him, was obsessing over the mechanics of the business, like knowing what works, why it works, having the best products, the earliest version of products, was a principle that really helped. And then because we did that, we were able to take on projects that were really growth oriented. So a lot of stuff we did was in the restoration space early on. So like we did a project where it was about a mile and a half of stone wall and we were restoring it. And at that time we were doing like one of the oldest cemeteries in the country. And my dad didn't have a lot of historical restoration experience. We did it in the family, but because he had been studying all these products that were coming out, everything on the spec sheet my dad already knew. He's like, oh, I've tested these, I've played with these, I know this stuff. And it was a level playing field because nobody else had used these products either. So the architect's like, I don't know how these work. And so we'd go to the pre-bid meeting and my dad's like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so at the rep, I know the rep. And then now the architect's talking to the material rep about my dad. Oh, I've known him for, X amount of years. He's amazing. So we broke into this space, completely put us on the map. I mean, my dad, we did a Chatham Public Library. It's one of the oldest libraries in the country. And we actually had to rebuild the stone. They had to take pieces of the blue stone, send it to a lab, make a powdered version of that, and a liquid version of the dye. And we actually had to like remove the failed stone and then stain it. So we used a cement-based product, but it was literally like powdered stone. It had the exact porosity. And this was 20 years ago that we were doing stuff like this. We had chemists and they were doing like humidity tests on the stone, and we had moisture meters, and like that, we got a historical preservation award for that job. But the root of it was my dad being a nerd about all the products. Like that was what set us up for that big moment.
That's cool. I was just taking a note. Sorry. Switching gears, let's go back to you'd made mention that you yourself have received a lot of awards, but go back to the what is it, SkillsUSA?
Yeah.
Let the audience talk to us about how that prompted you to look at what you do as a trade differently, as far as this from the skills perspective, and the competitions and the things like that. How have you been able to parlay that into like a teaching moment as you've gotten older and more experienced?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. So growing up, all I knew was contractors, right? That was literally like everybody that came to our house. It was like, I mean, that was literally all I knew. That and the Yellow Page guy, who I didn't really like, but that was very much my whole, my whole childhood.
We'll forget about him now, yeah.
So I was in this bubble where I didn't know there was a trade stigma. Then I go to elementary school and I start realizing, oh, I'm coming to school dirty. I'm wearing work boots. I'm leaving early. Like my dad shows up in a truck and he's filled with materials and he's picking me up. Like I started to realize, oh, I'm different. Like I'm not, like my dad came in to pick me up one time and he was all dirty. And I remember he like tracked mud in the school and like all the kids were making fun of me. And I started to realize, like, wait a minute, something's like, I'm not like all these other kids. They're not all their dads are coming home at 7, 8 o'clock and like the first thing they do is shower because they're filthy from a long day's work. And so I'm in eighth grade. I'm getting ready to go to high school, and I decided I was going to go to a vocational school. But at that point, I really knew that, like, I understood the trade stigma. It was clearly evident. Like, I would get calls on the weekends, like my dad, hey, I need you to help. Like, other kids weren't doing that. And so I go to the high school, and they had a program called SkillsUSA where you compete in your trade. So they break it out. It's you physically build something. You show up. There's a piece of paper. It's face down. You flip it over. It shows you what to build. It's a diagram, and I've got my brick, my block, my mortar, and that's it. And you've got 8 hours to build it. And they judge you up to I think it's a 16th of an inch in any direction. They have criteria. It's really, really rigorous. And they do it at the school level, district, state, and then national. And I remember my sophomore year, I placed third in my school, and I stood up on a stage, and they put a medal over me like the Olympics, and everyone's clapping. And it was like a weird moment of my life where I was like, whoa, like, my dad's not the only person that's, or his friends aren't the only people. Like, I've never stood on a stage in a nice jacket and gotten a medal for laying brick. My dad paid me more because I knew how to lay brick, but nobody clapped for me. And so it started this whole pride thing for me. And then when I placed first and I got a raise, my dad told me, he said, at every level you place first, I'll give you $1 an hour raise. So I'm like, my junior year, I'm getting first in all these.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was
doing that on Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it changed the whole mindset of the trades.
So then now correct me if I'm wrong, but now you speak to a lot of high school kids or even trade school and below to inspire them to get into the trades, do you not? And then how does that usually work? Like, are you actively involved in the teachings, or are you just going to speak with them? And now are you doing this just in the LA, Orange County area, or how does it look?
So what happened was my high school did an article on me, and then SkillsUSA caught wind of it because I spent my whole life just working. Like, I never thought of myself as an example.
Right.
Like, my dad taught me, like, be humble, don't tell people how much you make, like, don't be flashy. And so I never really took the time to even think about the things I had accomplished. And so when my school did the article, SkillsUSA got it, I did an interview with them, and they were like, hey, your story is really inspiring. And I was so busy just working and looking up to the people that I looked up to, I didn't think about a high school student and how they would perceive it. So yeah, I ended up speaking at the National Leadership Conference for SkillsUSA. I think it was 15,000 kids. I'm doing a lot of work with that organization, doing a lot with high schools. My goal is, I have a speech actually in a week, right around about a week from today, that I'm going to be speaking to my high school as a pilot for what I want to do across trade shows across the country. And the message really is that any dream is possible in the skilled trades, and there's no better time in the history of the world to be doing what these people are doing. And I think, the message is, I'm living proof of that. And I did this when I was in school. I graduated in 2010, high school. That was during the recession when everybody was telling us to get out. They were like, this is the worst time to get in the trade. So if anyone's listening, I did that during the worst time. Like, now is literally the best time. Like, there's a labor shortage. There's so many opportunities.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
So speaking of, now you just went right into the next segue, which is you co-founded the Contractor Consultants. And can you let the audience know what it is, why you started it, what you guys are doing? Because I think it's a compelling story once again. So if you would go down that rabbit hole and entertain the audience.
Yeah, I mean, what happened for me was, I think to color that a little bit, was I started realizing that the business was doing really well, my construction company, And I started to ask myself, my daughter was on the way. I started to question, like, where can I contribute and be an example? Like, what am I passionate about? And I made the decision that I was going to give as much time, money, and resources that I can to help the next generation. Like, so that some student doesn't have to go through the same fear that I had when I decided to do Evoke High School and everyone said I was crazy. Or, when I was in college and my professors would laugh at me because I was dirty. Like, I went through so much, like, just internal doubt. And anytime anything happened that wasn't perfectly aligned with my goals, that all those people would come in and be like, see, I told you, the college is the right thing and you made the wrong move and you shouldn't have taken over the business, like every upset. And so I think, I made the decision to try and show people that it doesn't have to be this way. And so the Contractor Consultants, that whole company was really bred from that idea. And so I had hiring troubles in 2019, right around 2019, where I joke that I'm a recovering sales junkie. And what I mean by that is I was so top line focused. Like, I thought you could sell your way out of anything. And that came from my fears in 2008 when I saw all my dad's friends going out of business. And they were, 9-figure companies and strong 8-figure companies. So I thought, as long as you sold, you were good. That was the old marketing, the digital. But I had my own blind spot, which was not focusing on hiring as much as I could have been. So 2019, here's what the company looked like. I was doing the Veterans National Cemetery. I was laying like 18,000 pieces of granite for the Los Angeles Cemetery. I was doing, I think, 3 celebrity homes, people that you'd know on TV. Like, we were pinnacle. We were selling $1 million projects were coming in, like, it was like high-fiving, crazy. And I remember thinking, I made it. Like, this company that my great-grandfather's got on a boat for this moment. Like, I walked up to the National Cemetery and I saw all the veterans in the graves and just the memorial. And I was like, this is it. Well, I wasn't listening to something that was happening in the background. My team kept knocking, saying, Matt, we're struggling to hire. Matt, we posted ads, it's not working. And I kept saying, well, call up so-and-so. Like, he's usually slow. We'll bring him in our crew. Or, I knew smaller companies that we would bring on, like, mom and pop, like 3-4 people. We'd bring them in as a crew and help us push work along. None of that was working. The market was too hot. And so I remember a meeting and they brought me in and they had these whiteboards filled out. And it was uncommon to show up to a meeting like this where my team was like, you need to come to this meeting, my senior leadership team. And they showed me all the money that I was going to lose, all the canceled contracts. Then the next board was all of the liquidated damages. Then the next board was all the job overruns because we can't staff for key milestones. And it was like, I was basically, I did quick math. It was around $1 million that I was going to lose in the next 3 to 4 weeks, like inevitable. There was no way to stop it. I remember driving home and thinking, I literally took a family business that I think it was right around 99 years that we could track it, almost 100 years, and I ruined it. And so I became obsessed with the same obsession I had with marketing. I became obsessed with hiring and culture. And I told myself, I said, if I can't figure this out and I can't grow the company, I felt like a prisoner. Like, people were throwing contracts at us. They were like, here, we'll pay you 10% more. When can you start? And I couldn't get to the work. It was the worst feeling. And I was losing money. So I set out to solve hiring. And I did, like, when I say I obsessed, I literally called my CPA and I said, hey, how much money can I spend in this business without tanking it? And he told me the number and I moved it into a separate account. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I just started spending.
Yeah.
Consultants, traveling, all of that across the country, reading books, hiring recruiters, interviewing recruiters. And that became a system that I used to solve my problem. Then I helped people locally. Then I started doing trade associations and talks with them. And then my daughter was real young. And my wife said, look, you can't be doing dinners with everybody. Like, you're never home. So I made the decision. Yeah. She's like, well, you go from like almost taking the business and we're stressed because you're like, working, to now it's like everything's great and you're working even more trying to give all this advice away. So that was the decision to make the course, which we did. And then we got the co-founder of ZipRecruiter, got word of it, reviewed it, and it led to like corporate partnerships and speaking and all kinds of things. But it was just a system that I found through trial and error, and really going back to that like humble, hungry student.
So what are you doing? Well, let's dissect that a little bit further. What let the audience know. What does it specifically do, Matt? I mean, you gave the success of it, but I haven't seen under the hood. Like, give us the look under the hood. Like, what is it? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm a simple guy, right? I'm ADHD, dyslexic. Like things have to be simple. So I broke it to 4 key steps, right? First, you got to find a massive list of candidates. Then when you do that, you got to be able to vet them quickly and efficiently. It means you got to move A players to the front of the line or you lose them, and you got to move, your C and D's. You got to be able to sift them out quickly. Then you got to know how to hire them. Like, how do you present an offer letter? How do you close the deal? And then you got to know how to retain them. How do I keep them here? And there's really a subsection, which is maximization after that. Like, now they're here. How do I maximize their motivation and their output? So it's 4 key steps in that maximization on the back end. So when we finished the course, we had 37 proven ways to find candidates. But I wanted to look at, so I took what my grandfather and great-grandfather did to grow the company, which we called old school methods, like recruiting cards and how they incentivized people they knew, down to like digital strategies like geofencing, career videos, partner lists. So we looked at it from every angle. I essentially, the main premise of this was, I did a panel that I think highlights this. I was on a panel and they had 7 hiring experts in the construction industry. And I don't know how I got there, but they put me on this panel too. And so the woman,
the other 2 guys didn't show up.
Yeah, right, exactly. So the woman to my left, she said,
"Hey, let's take the dumb masonry guy. He'll fill in, right?"
Yeah, exactly. I was the bench warmer. I was like, "Put me in, coach." No. She said, "How do you hire?" And her answer was, you got to use digital strategies. Got to use Indeed, keyword testing, headline testing, all of that. Mike passes to my right, so it goes to me and the guy to my right. He gets up and he's like, "Yeah, you can do that." He's like, "But that's overrated. You got to go to church, kiss babies, and get to meet people." And I waited and I paused and I was like, you have to do all of these things because every market is unique. Like, the amount of times when I was building the course that I talked to people or I saw and they were like, "This is the way." And I would try it and it would fail miserably. And then I would give it that strategy to a friend of mine in, like, for example, a fence company, and it would work great for him. Like, you have to incubate and test different methods locally. And that was the biggest takeaway. That's why we have so many different ways to find candidates, because in this labor market, which is so tight, there's not just like a one size fits all. Here's your toolkit. If you get to a point where you use every one of these tools, I guarantee you will absolutely decimate your hiring problems. But I can't tell you which one. I can give you likelihood of success or order of magnitude for success, but I can't say these 2 things are going to solve your issue for sure.
So you were talking, Matt, about how you had the ZipRecruiters and the Indeeds and the people, the large corporate entities out there. And forgive me for not researching this before we did the podcast, but now, do you monetize that, or are you only using this internally for you, or are you sharing it with the world and then just charging for it?
Monetizing the course itself, or the relationship we have?
Yeah.
So the course.
No, the course itself. Like, is that a revenue stream for you, or have you partnered with like the ZipRecruiters of the world, or how did you take it to the next level after you developed it?
So what happened was, so I built this course, and my goal was to build the most detailed educational product with no monetization. I had no monetization strategy. So I'm out hundreds of thousands of dollars. I professionally filmed it. I had zero strategy.
So you're just going to do it for yourself.
My goal was to solve my problem and have a product that I could be proud of. Then we said, okay, let's bring this out to the marketplace. So we built some partnerships where we could potentially do some strategic, perhaps get it in front of the right companies and give it away, and then a monetization strategy. And when we were testing the marketing, I had somebody early on when we were testing selling it direct to consumer. I had a mean comment. Some guy was like, "If you know so much about hiring, dummy, why don't you just do it for us, you scam artist?" And so I went with my business partner, and at first I was pissed. I was like, this guy, like, nothing like this that I know of and I researched heavy exists in the marketplace. Half of these strategies I've never seen. Like, I was showing people how to pull building permits. Like, at that roofing convention, I was like, you can pull a list of building permits and drive by those jobs, like ninja stuff that nobody that I knew of was talking about these things. And And he calls me a fraud. And then I thought about it and I said, you know what? He's right. And so we focused on delivering a product that would do this for companies. So the course became a stepping stone. We have that, and that'll be a continued revenue stream for us. But my main goal was like, how do I, like, really what I heard him say, I don't know if this is right or not, but I read that as, hey, I just want you to do this for me. And I was like, okay. So we built what we believe now is going to disrupt the way that recruiters and staffing agencies hire. We have a low monthly fee. It's built to be a trusted, basically, arm of any construction company's business. And our margins are very low, and the service is priced to help construction companies grow. And to the detriment of a lot of consultants who said we should be charging 2 or 3 times a month what we're doing, like, our business, the success has been, we're already in the Canada market. We're beta testing UK and Australia. It's been the feedback of seeing how these companies respond to it has been great, but the principles, a lot of them were founded in the course.
So here's a tough question then, Matt. If you had, well, I'm going to kind of dovetail a bunch of things together. So you had success at this, and then you naturally, when people have success, you have critics, right? You have naysayers, like you said, the guy that was blowing you up. So with that, have you then proven in your own, backyard, meaning California, have you been able to utilize this to attract, retain, and grow your staff to never have the same mistake that you did, when you had those backlogs? So, I got to put you on the spot. Are you a walking version of your talk?
Absolutely. No, you're not putting me on the spot at all. Absolutely. I had a bench. So people joke. They're like, oh, you must be hurting. You've got all these hiring ads up. I'm like, no, we're building a bench. It's what look at sports teams.
Right.
Like, the better the team, the more active they are at recruiting. So, like, it's interesting because I have some people that'll, like, they'll private message me and be like, hey, how come in your company you're still hiring? I'm like, because we're building a backlog. I want to be the first to receive any candidates that come through. But no, we've proven it with the most rigorous thing was when we were looking at some of our bigger corporate partners, and they were going through, like, what's your client list? How many people do you have? And how did this work? And we want to see testimonials, and we want to call them. But, the fact that, we're able to bring ZipRecruiter into, like, our webinars and into Stage, that we've got that kind of recognition among the, dozens, if not hundreds of testimonials that we'll continue to release. We've figured out a new model that solves 2 things. Number one is this is now a specialty. Like, it used to be that you could put up a website. If you were one of the first people to get a construction company to get a website, you struck gold. Your website could be horrible, but if there was no other websites, you were the first one, right? And then when everyone got websites, you had to get SEO, right? You had to optimize your website to show up higher. Well, what's happened with hiring is everybody's hiring in similar ways. And so now it's almost like a niche within a company, your hiring department. On top of that, there's a huge administrative burden because you have to get to candidates within the first few minutes. There's a massive amount of administrative burden that comes along with this. And so our business solves 2 issues. Number one, we specialize. So we have more data than any individual construction company would typically have, unless they're keyword testing, headline testing, and doing this across many different verticals across the country. And on top of that, we handle the administrative burden. So, like, we're not, we post the jobs, handle all of the headline testing, keyword testing, the initial pre-screening interviews, and all of a sudden on your calendar, boop, there becomes a final vetted interview on your calendar that is worth your time. That is the model that we have built. So you're only talking to the best candidates. Then when you're done, you tell us yes, no. If you say yes, we help you with the onboarding documents and the background checks. If you say no, we handle client rejection process for candidate. So those were the 2 bottlenecks, was like, companies are held administratively because your HR manager makes way too much money to be going yes, no, yes to resumes, right? And then it's like they have to be sitting at their inbox 24/7 because you need to get to a candidate right away, and you can automate some of that. And then there's obviously the issue of specialization, like what works, how does it work, and how do you know when to implement it?
What so a lot of on the podcast here, Matt, we get your success story. We get a lot of people then asking, all right, Matt, with all your success, are you grinding it out? Are you still in growth mode? Are you looking at expanding? Or because of your success, have you been approached by private equity and a bunch of mergers and acquisitions. Like where does the mind of Matt sit in your current trajectory of your company based on your successes?
Well, I mean, the family construction business will continue to grow organically. At one point I was like, maybe I'll take this across the country. It didn't fill my heart the same way this other business does, because I wasn't getting the impact. So I mean, we'll have continued growth there, but I'm not trying to take over the masonry world per se. And then I get asked that.
Pansy, come on, go for it.
We're very fortunate with that, and I've got a good senior management team that'll take that company, and we'll see continued growth. For this business, my goal is to help every construction company in the country. Like, that is the vision. We've been approached now. We've had 3 major offers to buy the company in early stages. 3, and we've had countless investors. But I funded it all in-house, no private equity, no investors. We wanted ultimate control, me and my co-founder Luca. And so the goal is to grow this. And it's funny, I don't share this, but I'll share it here because we're talking about it. So we celebrate our team. We calculate how much money we save the construction company based on if they had hired a recruiter instead of us. So every hire we make, we write fee saved. So we subtract what they paid us monthly. And so I just am so excited. I mean, last month we saved $1.6 million in recruiters' fees for construction companies. So my goal, you asked about growth, the company will fall under that growth, but my goal is to save tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in recruiters' fees and staffing agencies' fees with this business.
Cool. Hey, with your mindset then, Matt, what struggles do you have? Because it seems like every time an opportunity or a paradigm that you're faced with, you dig deep. You said you're kind of on the wackadoodle schedule like the rest of us that are either on the spectrum or ADHD or whatever. We all have a gift in some way, shape, or form, and usually it's just stubbornness. But be frank and humble. Like, what are the new challenges you're facing now, either with this business or with the masonry, the core business that you want to conquer next?
I mean, there's a ton. I'm not, this is probably a strength and probably a weakness. Is I'm very, I don't see myself as really I just do, and I think getting a little bit more clear on how I can be a better servant and help more people is definitely a challenge. Because my thing is like as soon as that guy put that bad comment, I'm like, I'm going to build a business. I'm just going to do this. Like, I don't want to sit here and compare a resume and say, hey, this course was endorsed by this. It got this award. Like, I'm like, we'll just do it. So I think figuring out how to help people in a way that that makes sense is definitely a strength that I'm trying to build, because I'm so used to just doing. Like, my whole background was like, don't tell me, show me. And now I'm in a place where people are inspired by telling them. And so, it's like, you can show me and that's great too, but like, explain it in a way that's exciting and motivational and digestible. And I don't know that I'm the best at that. So that's definitely something I'm working on, is crafting that message and then dealing with, there's a lot when you grow companies quickly. There's definitely a lot of control you give up, but like, it's my face. Like, I filmed this course, I'm in all the video modules. So there's a lot of like letting go. I used to give my dad crap. I'd be like, hey, what do you mean? Like, I'll take over the business. And now I'm like the face of this course and whatnot, and a lot of what we're doing. And it's a concern of like, building in the right team and just giving up space to really great people at a level that I never thought I would get to be honest. Like, the C-suite level, the, private equity level, like people approach, like, this is stuff you're talking to a guy who laid bricks at 14 years old. And my yearbook life goal for the speech that I'm doing now, my life goal is to own a masonry, to take over the family business. That was my life goal at 18 years old. So I never thought I could even get this far.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Bleu Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Bleu Wave to get it done right the first time.
So go back. You've mentioned it a couple times now. What did you specifically do, or what were the indicators when you knew you had to let go? Because you've talked about your C-suite or your senior management team. For a guy your age, without patronizing you, you had a humility to see it and then hire some people either smarter or complementary to you to take over those senior positions as you were in growth mode. What did that look like and feel like for you? And what were those key mechanisms that allowed you to go, holy shit, I got to get out of my own way?
Well, I was so fortunate because growing up, I saw, like, I was below my dad. So I saw growing up for a lot of the company, like, my dad sucks the air out of the room. He's got a big presence, right? And so, like, I was always a little quieter. Like, I was timid. I was the one who had to clean, if he got upset or left, like, I would be the one like, hey, we'll figure this out. So, but I got to observe the shortcomings of my dad. Like, I would see him get upset on a job site and be like, what do you mean? This is this. And he'd leave. And then all the guys would talk about him. They'd be like, man, your dad, he got so mad and I worked so hard. And so I got to see it from both levels. Like, I got to then go home with my dad, hear his side of the story. But when he was gone, I would hear the whole team's story. So I got to live in two worlds. And what that taught me was I got to see that, like, we had really great people in the company that really wanted to do well. And the only thing holding them back a lot of times, or in those times, I should say, was my dad giving up control, like really just giving the empowerment and the trust. And that was a huge insecurity of me growing up. Was I was like, I told myself, I made a promise. I said, we had a really great guy, worked for my dad for about 16 years and quit. Great guy. My dad regretted it. Like, he left, couldn't get him back.
He's probably like family member.
He was. Oh, he saw me. I mean, I have photos of sitting on his lap as a little baby. I mean, it was crazy. And so my dad was like, there were so much struggle later to replace him and what that did to the company. And I made a promise to myself. I said, if I ever get the opportunity to hire great people, I'm going to step out of the way and give them the widest, longest lane I could possibly give them. And it came from that insecurity of, well, I don't ever want to be in a situation where there's people that have better ideas, better systems, better processes, and I'm solely standing in the way because of fear or ego. And I mean, young age, and I try and check myself, every week I reflect on, where do my assets sometimes become liabilities? And because I think all assets become liabilities at some point. Like, I was the best salesperson in the company. That was a huge asset until it came time to scale, and now it's the biggest liability. And so that I learned that shift, and that really helped me a lot.
So let's stay on this path of discussion. I don't think it has to be just family, but give your advice, your humble advice to anyone that's watching this, as far as those entrepreneurial type things. And what I'm saying by both is because you've got a unique position of you're a multi generational, family business, which a lot of let's be honest, a lot of us in the construction space, that's how we were brought up, whether it was, like your story or whatever it was. But then there's a lot of people that just want to say, wow, Matt was inspiring, but what else, what other things would he like to share with me, or advice that he would be willing to give? So again, you've been very accelerated in your career path at your age to already have seen all those trials and tribulations. What are those key advice things that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think the biggest thing that we did was I had guiding pillars throughout my entire journey, like things that grounded me in my toughest moments. And I think when you establish those early on, like, for example, I got into this industry because I love it, right? I love what I do. Like, I love building, and I love the hiring side now. So that was a foundational principle. The other one is treat customers like they're your neighbors. Any decision you ever make in business, like, pretend they're your neighbor, you'll always make the right decision. Honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Play the long game and never, so these things ring in my head. So whenever I come to face with a tough decision, I'm looking back at this, don't play the short game, right? Treat people fairly and good and like you would do if they're your neighbor, and the love and the passion for it. Like, those three things have set up everything that I've done, because I had the energy to withstand the hard, the hard times, because I wasn't playing the short game, right? I was like, well, what's a bad year, right? And I had a bad year. I mean, when I lost $1 million, trust me, that was a bad year. My CPA still reminds me. So it's like, but I wasn't looking at this as a year-long race. I was looking at this as a career. I'm gonna die doing this. And so when you play the long game, when you have some guiding principles, like, it's almost like your cheat sheet, right? Like, you don't want to be writing your cheat sheet for your guiding principles in the middle of a storm. Like you're in a boat, there's a storm, it's rocking everywhere, and you're like, all right, what are the principles I'm going to use that are going to help me get through this? You can't think of it in that time. So with a clear head, jot down your key guiding principles that are your lighthouse, and then just refer back to them and take time to think. Like one of the things I did later in life was I stopped making decisions so quickly on some big decisions. My first decision would be, how long am I going to take to decide on this? So that was a big breakthrough for me. So, questions about private equity or questions about, certain facets of the business and growth markets, I'm going to give myself 48 hours to decide on this. So I'll make a decision quickly, but my decision will be how long to make the decision. And that helped me because I realized that if there's been a lot of things in the moment that I make a decision on that I wake up the next day and I think about it again, and it's not the same decision. And that's always made me very not fearful, but very aware. And so I try and give myself at least 24 hours to 48 hours on any big decision, but I force myself to make a decision immediately, which is how long will I give myself? So I don't procrastinate. I don't lollygag. I'm like, I'm going to make this decision in 24 hours, like on my calendar, done. And that's helped me a lot.
I like that. I've never heard anyone talk about that decision-making paradigm of defining the time in which you're going to make the decision. I'm sure it's been written in other leadership or type books, but I got to be honest, that's pretty profound. I like that, Matt. Hey, let me go back. One thing that's been resonating in my mind as I've listened to you is, how in the hell did you just transplant from the East Coast to the West Coast? I mean, if you just graduated in 10, you're still a young stud. And 13 years later to have your kind of success, how do you transplant to California? Let's be honest, highly regulatory, not easy just to set up roots, very capital intensive. How were you able to get that success so early in a new market?
There's a formula. So what I did was I found the cheapest companies and like the most affordable companies, and I charged less than them. So I lost money, or I basically made the equivalent of like $8 to $10 an hour on my first 5 projects. And I made sure that those 5 projects were the best. Like I took out their trash, I Windexed their windows. I just made sure that it was like it was the best experience they've ever had where money left their hands and went into someone else's hands. Then I got their reviews, Then I got the referrals. But what really helped me was there was one moment where I was dealing with a client. This was kind of like the big jump. And he had a leak in his pool. He's in a lot of movies. We would know his movies, but he basically had a leak in his pools, and I knew it. Like I'd fixed these exact issues before in the past, and he basically shot me down. He's like, "Listen, kid, you look like you're 7. I've had 4 other people 3 times your age come out here and tell me it's not a leak." And I said to him, all right, how about this? I said, I will pay this leak detection company $3,000 to conduct a full analysis of this leak under one condition. I said, if I'm right, you'll hire me for the project. And he's like, okay, hotshot. Boom, put his hand out, shook his hand, sent them an agreement. I sent them out. They did a dye test. They did smoke, did all kinds of stuff. They found the leaks, which were exactly where I said they were. He hired me to do the job. And we had to basically take off all the stonework, fix the pool, do all these things. And he was big in the entertainment world. And he referred me to producers and actors and a lot of high-profile people that I don't think I ever would have had the chance to just stumble into at such a early phase. And I had this currency of trust. And my dad always told me, he's like, the most important thing you have is your name and your reputation. And so I made that bet when I didn't have a lot of money, but I knew, and it was a threat to my brand and my trust when he was like, there's 4 other people you don't know what you're talking about, young kid. And I didn't want to argue with him. And so that moment when I was willing to die on that, on that point, die on that hill, so to speak, was what catapulted me. Like literally my next project from that was probably $400,000 or $500,000. And it was like a whole outdoor yard. And it was just like, it just cascaded.
And then it cascaded after that.
Yeah.
Hey, so Matt, on that then, another question that everyone always wants to know is, okay, Matt, who do you surround yourself with as far as like mentoring? And do you hang out with other CEOs, or do you hang out with other construction people? Like, how do you get your assimilation of knowledge and that entrepreneurship that everyone's always seeking?
So I'm a little bit different in this regard, and I definitely I seek a lot of mentorship, but I found for me I'm very creative and innovative, and so what I find is sometimes if I see how other people are doing things too much, it'll cloud my confidence in a newer, different way. So I strike a balance. There's certain people, like I have a marketing mentor. His name's Jay Abraham. But like helped me, I mean, in a ways that I can't even, there's no words to describe what he did for me. I've read a lot of books, like Keith Cunningham has amazing stuff. I mean, I could go on and on, but the name of the game is I surround myself with people smarter than me, but I get a lot more out of understanding their process, not what they tell me, but what they did. I'm like, for example, all of these people have books, or like I can dissect their journey and figure out how. So I listen with two ears. One ear is what you're telling me directly to solve the problem. The other is how did you answer my question? Like, what did you say first? What questions did you ask me to answer my question? So I can live in two worlds at the same time, which is how is your decision making done? Like when I sit down, what do you ask? You ask for water. What, like, how do you frame the mentorship while also taking the advice? And that skill set has helped me immeasurably.
Well answered. Well stated, by the way. I give you chops for that answer because you weren't a conformist and just going along with everyone else's, prototypical type thing. So I'm really glad you shared that. What, hey Matt, with the time winding down here, what haven't I asked you? Either about your, the contractor consultants or DiBara Masonry proper. What would you like to share with the audience that we haven't approached or I haven't asked you?
I think the biggest thing is just thinking back to my growth was the concept of like this seems impossible and then going through it. And I think part of that is writing down goals and getting comfortable. Like I found success through getting basically like, for example, before I was doing 8 figures, I surrounded myself with people that would be uncomfortable doing 8 figures. Like people, when they would read my financials, they kept adding a zero because they were used to reading so much bigger numbers. And that helped me because like everything became, it was a constant reminder of what's possible. And so I think I don't often talk about this, but in mentorship, I think one of the biggest things you're paying for, I think there's 2 things if you decide to pay for a mentor. One is this concept of like, it's a living, breathing example of what's possible. But I think the second thing, like the most I ever paid, I paid $12,000 for 1 hour of advice. And this was early on in my career. And people said I was crazy. Like my friends were like, why would you do that? Like there's nothing they could do that's worth that. And I said, you're missing the point. I said, I could go to this meeting. He could not show up. And I got my money's worth. And he said, why? And I said, because I was worth the $12,000. And that was a big paradigm shift for me. Like when I look at like my big growth, when I made the investment in myself, that was a big, like I was worthy of the success. And that was a big thing. Like I paid the 12 grand, I showed up and I got great advice, but nothing could have happened. But I spent $12,000 with the confidence that I would find something in the meeting worth more than $12,000. I wasn't betting on the mentor. I was betting on my ability to find value in that. And so I think a lot of times we flip it and we're like, that person's charging so much or that's so much. It's like about them. I'm like, maybe sometimes you should spend the money for your confidence in you. They don't even have to be there. And so it was an interesting paradigm. But when I really started to understand this, I found a lot of these blocks and struggles just immediately disappear.
Well stated. Well, Matt, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up, but I want to just say thank you for coming on. And for the audience's sake, can't stress enough that if you want to reach out to Matt DiBara, and I would imagine, Matt, you're going to get a bunch of hits and links on the Contractor Consultants because, and yes, everyone wants to know what you do as a Mason because that story is pretty compelling. But I think more importantly, what you've done to handle the I don't want to say HR because it's much deeper than HR, but that whole recruitment conversation we went down, there isn't a company out there that isn't struggling in some capacity in that to find their quan, and their answers in their respective struggles with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if much of the audience wants to reach out to you, just get your advice or hire you or however you can monetize that with them. They love to see that less than recruiter fee on their on their invoice as well. So with that, thanks, my friend, for being a guest on Mac and Bleu today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Mac and Bleu Show, brought to you by Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Bleu podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow JJ Levinsky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in every Monday